In any case, thank you all very much for coming this Friday evening. We're very, very privileged and happy to have in our midst Mr. Christian Masset, who is Secretary General of the French Foreign Ministry. I think you have a little bio of him in front of you, but let me say a few words about our speaker. Of course, he's had the usual very distinguished education of all French civil servants, so I won't summarize that for you. He's served in many different countries. Amongst them, of course, he's served time in London, in Pretoria, in Italy, and of course at EU, where he's served at least twice. He's held a number of other responsibilities. Mr. Masset was appointed Director of Economics and Financial Affairs in 2007. He was head of the General Directorate for Global Affairs, Development and Partnerships in 2009. He's also served as chairman of the board of directors of the Agency for French Teaching Abroad, which we know in France is a very important matter, and of France Cooperation International, which is responsible for promoting French technical expertise abroad, and was a member of the board of the French Institute as well. Most recently, from December 2011 to July 2014, he was the French ambassador to Japan, and has been Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Development since August 2014. Mr. Masset has been decorated as well. He is Knight of the Legion of Honor and Knight of the Order of Merit as well. His topic today is priorities of French foreign policy, which partnership with Asia. Let me say three things about the context. France, of course, has many long-standing connections to Asia historically, but of course a very distinguished academic tradition of studying Asia and understanding Asia and interpreting Asia for the rest of the world. It's, of course, very famous for the independence of its foreign policy and its view of the world, even with some of its friends. And, of course, it's also rightly famous for its support of internationalist causes, the global good, while safeguarding its own interests, and brings a certain kind of sophistication on behalf of its interests, therefore, in its diplomacy. The focus is in Asia, but Mr. Masset inevitably will deal with a number of the other global challenges that I think we see on our television screens every day. And so, of course, I think developments in Europe with the Ukraine, in the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, and of course, perhaps the situation that seems to have resolved itself, at least for the time being, in Scotland, might come up. And with that, let me turn it over to you and welcome to the school.
Good evening, everybody. Bonjour. So my name is Christian Masset, and I'm very glad to be among you this evening. I know this is the very last day of the classes, and so you are extremely courageous, and so I'm very grateful to you to be here. I appreciate very much. I arrived yesterday night with a delegation to have consultations with the permanent secretaries of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and as always, it's such a great pleasure to discuss with counterparts from Singapore, because we share this sense of vision and this global perspective. Obviously, when I received a very kind invitation of Professor Mabupani and Professor Bashpai, I was very impressed, and my first temptation was to refuse, because this was a too prestigious institute or school for me, because it has really a worldwide reputation. And also, it bears the name of the founder of your state, and who is really at the highest point, the expression of what vision means. On top of that, I was very glad to come to Singapore, because next year you will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the creation of the state, and we will celebrate it together. because there will be celebrations here with a cultural festival, but a wide cultural festival called Voila, and also a great cultural festival in Paris or in France called the Singapore Festival, which will attract a lot of people. And President Tan has been invited to come to Paris to celebrate with us. So for all these reasons, really, I was very pleased and very proud to come before you to share some views about the partnership that France is building with Asia. And we are in a very crucial phase, and we think that this partnership is particularly important in order to address an accumulation of challenges, which is really the signature of this beginning of the 21st century, either peace and security, economy, and conservation of the planet. And so what I propose to you is to go through that. So first the partnership, and after the challenges that we have to face together, if this is all right. I don't know how much time do I have to speak. It's 40 minutes. 40 minutes, yes. So yes, it will. As far as partnership with Asia, as Professor Bajpai said, we have a long history with Asia. We have centuries of history with Asia. We have among the best schools in Europe for knowledge of Asia are in France. We have also 3 Asian countries which are part of the Francophone world. So we have really a very long history. But there has been a kind of, as Gorbachev said, a kind of acceleration of history regarding this relationship, because now we are really building a partnership. The first expression of this this political will, is a number of visits by the President, the Prime Minister, and ministers to Asia. And this started in 2012. And between May and 2012 and November end of 2013, we had 33 visits, and many of the Prime Minister and also of the President to Asia, compared with 13 during the 2 previous years. So this is really the expression of this will. Second expression of this will is that most of these visits have ended up with a signature and establishment of strategic partnerships. There has been, it has been the case with Singapore in 2012, and the first visit of the Prime Minister outside France, newly appointed Prime Minister, was to go to Singapore. And I must say that this is my first visit abroad as a newly appointed Secretary General, and it is in Singapore, and I am very proud of it. And this is not by chance, because it's really a meaning that really there is a priority for French diplomacy on Asia. We have established a strategic partnership with Vietnam, for example. We have established in 2013 a strategic partnership with Japan. And we have a strategic dialogue very established, very deep with India. And this year, obviously, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the diplomatic relationship between France and People's Republic of China, because, as you know, in 1964, General de Gaulle was the first Western leader to recognize the People's Republic of China. And President Xi Jinping came to Paris, and so we have really deepened very much this strategic partnership that we have with China. Strategic partnership is not a kind of buzzword or a kind of cover to something which is the same than before. It's different, because this means that we are acting together at the same time on all the pillars: peace and security, economy, finance, and also people-to-people exchange, which means university, visas, science, culture. And we do all this together. And also what is very important, We had a kind of strategic dialogue in order just to deal with the great question of the world that we will discuss in a few minutes. For the economy, it is the same, because obviously if there is this shift towards Asia, it is because there is a perception that our interests, our future, lies more and more in Asia. Our exports to Asia have doubled since 2005. And now they represent 12% of our global exports, but this has to be related to the fact that 60% of our exports go to Europe because of the deep integration within the European Union. So this means that now more than 25% and soon I think 30 and over % of our exports will be in Asia. The same also for French population abroad. Now we have 120,000 citizens living in Asia, and it is the fastest growing French community in the world. And one example, in 2003 in Singapore, there were, let's say, 3,000 to 4,000 French citizens, French nationals. Now there are over 15,000. This means that really it's really a kind of massive move of people now working in Asia and working with Asia. I can also talk about in our investment, because 20% of the foreign investment is in Asia, with particularly Japan, India, and China, obviously, and obviously it is a growing number. Also, as far as security is concerned, we are more and more looking at what is going in Asia, because we know that if there are tension or disruptions, this will have an effect on our economy and on our own security. And this is really a new perception. It didn't exist, let's say, even 5 or 7 years ago. And obviously, we look also at this because we are the only European country to have a permanent navy, both in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean. So these are a few clues about this kind of big shift of French diplomacy towards Asia. But this is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. And just to tell you that France is also definitely and keenly open to Asia. Because first we have, to some extent, Asia in our DNA. Because almost, I think, 1 million people are from Asian communities or from Asian descent in France. So Asia is really part of our people. But above all, because now France want to increase its attractiveness to attract talents, tourists, investments, students. Because France sees itself, as Singapore sees itself, as a hub. You are the gate and the hub of Asia, one of the 2 or 3 main ones, and we are a gate to Europe. And Europe, it's 500. European Union is 500 million people, the biggest market, and France is at the core of that market. And it is the second largest economy, and also in terms of demography. It is, in fact, a very dynamic demographic. It has a very dynamic demography. Just to tell you that more than 50% of natural growth in Europe is in France. So this means it is fundamentally a very vital and dynamic country, and we are taking at the moment a whole range of reforms in order to increase competitiveness of the economy and attractiveness. Attractiveness of students. We are the third country in terms of foreign students. We have 300,000 foreign students, among which 50,000 from Asia. We are in terms of stocks the third destination of investment in the world, of foreign investment, and we are the government at the moment. It's really taking a whole range of measures and policies regarding simplification, lowering of the cost of labor, have a better flexibility adapted with security of labor, and cutting red tape and reducing public spending. Another element which is very important is because it relates to precisely this university. We, in spite of the economic crisis that we all experience after what we called in Japan the Lehman shock, we have increased the expenditure and the investment in culture, education, and university and research. We are the only country in Europe where, in fact, expenses for university have increased since 2008. And this continues, and this is precisely in order to make France a hub in Europe and to have a closer link, in particular with Asia. And for example, if you have in Singapore campuses of ESSEC, INSEAD, EDEC, it's precisely to foster these exchanges between Europe and Asia. So this is what I wanted just to say simply about what we want to do with our partnership. Another element, because I know that you are very interested in stability and security, with this strategic partnership we mentioned, obviously we have developed considerably exchanges of military people, industrial cooperations, strategic dialogues on the biggest threats, and so with a number of Asian countries, and also we are much more present than before in this. In these areas. All this, we think, is quite necessary because we are facing challenges whose number is of a very particular dimension. And the best example is what happened during the summer. You had Gaza, you had Ukraine, and you had Iraq. And this was piling other crises which are not solved. And so I would like to go a little bit into these different crises and how we see these challenges. First, it is about peace and security. We really think that there has been a paradigm shift at the beginning of the 21st century. Because first, we have no longer a country or an alliance of countries which is able to regulate or to fix the different problems of the planet or different crises, regional crises. There is one expression to say from the West to the rest. But in fact, we don't know where this power has gone. It has not gone from the West to the rest. Because in fact, nobody is really. We have a multiplication of crises, and we had a bipolar world with the USSR and US. After the fall of the Soviet Union, we had a unipolar world, and now we have a zero-polar world. And this makes, in fact, the world more dangerous. Second, we have a fragmentation of power, which goes to the states, to non-state organizations or leagues, and for that, for example, what happens in Iraq is obviously topical. What happens in Libya too, and what happened in Mali as well. And last but not least, we have dispersion of capacities of destruction. For example, the means that ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, has at its disposal have no comparison with the arms that Al-Qaeda had, or and so this is also a new phenomenon. And all these three together, obviously, put an extraordinary challenge to all countries of the world. So I will go simply into a number of crises in order just to tell what we are doing and what we think that we should do. First is Africa. Africa is very important. It's a country of the future in terms of markets, resources, and manpower. But obviously, whether things are going right or wrong in Africa, this will make an enormous difference in the course of the century. And we were facing in Mali 1 year ago a tremendous challenge. There's a possibility for a terrorist group to take over the capital and establish a kind of terrorist state just in the middle of Africa. And that is why, on the request of the government of Mali, we decided to act. Now the situation has stabilized. But it is not, the solution is not still there. Now, fortunately, so African forces first, and after UN peacekeeping mission has taken over. Because when we act, we don't not want to remain. We act because there is an urgency and nobody else is able to do it. Because if not, obviously, we would be very happy to have UN peacekeeping. But all this takes time. And also, we are very much working on African peacekeeping operations through training, and this is really the future, but this obviously takes time. After we have had Central Africa, which is a different crisis between communities, between Muslims and non-Muslims. There also, we have stabilized the situation. And also there, also peacekeeping operation last week has just taken over from the African forces and on our operations. But we have still these groups of terrorists and traffickers in all these bands of Sahara and Sahel. And we have in Libya a tremendous conflict between the authorities which have been elected and the militias who do not want to accept the vote of the people. And with a lot of weapons that are around, and that have all the arsenal of Gaddafi has gone through Africa, and so this is a very dangerous situation that can have an impact on our security, on our standard of living. Let's think about Boko Haram, north of Nigeria. All this is the same band. There are different groups, but they are related to some extent to each other, or there are similarities. And Boko Haram obviously is a big threat to Nigeria, which is the biggest economy and the biggest country in Africa, with threat on Chad, threats on Cameroon. So, and that is why we have decided to transform the forces that we had in Mali and Central Africa in a trans-regional or transnational force called Barkhane, able to be very mobile and help peacekeepers in order to do their job. A force of 3,000 soldiers. So this is one example. Second element is Iraq. You know well the situation, and you know well that it is really a death threat for the Iraqis, a death threat for the region, and a threat to the rest of the world. And this is why we have taken all actions, which are not only military. We think that always we have to have a comprehensive action. And for example, it's what we are doing in Africa, where we have a military component, but also there is a political component. That's why in Mali we have demanded that there should be elections in order just to stabilize. And after, obviously, development and economic development dimension. For Iraq, the great challenge, and this is it was the purpose of the conference that took place in Paris on the 15th of this month, was first to support the new government of national unity. Because without government of national unity in Baghdad, it's not possible to address the issue of ISIL. And after, obviously, we have to address the military response, and we will be part of it. And President Hollande yesterday said that on the request of the government of Iraq, so we will strike targets of ISIL in Iraq, and also a humanitarian response. Ukraine, another crisis. Another crisis, and for us Europeans, a very serious one, because risking destabilization of the order that we established after the Second World War. Sovereignty, territorial integrity have been violated. We cannot accept the annexation of Crimea. But at the same time, we know that there will be no military solution. So our idea there too was to have a kind of combined approach with incitements for dialogue, and this is a sense of the sanctions that we have imposed on Russia. It was not for punishment, but just to kind of incitement for dialogue, to establish, precisely to help this dialogue between the Ukrainians and Russians, and it is what we did with the in Normandy, and what we call the process of Normandy, with Mrs. Merkel, President Hollande, President Putin, and President Poroshenko, and after also obviously keeping a line open, as European, particularly French, with President Putin. And so all this combined together could produce the protocol or the agreement that took place on the 5th of September between the separatists and President Poroshenko, and with a ceasefire. Verification by OSCE of what happens on the ground. And after a number of, and after the route for a political settlement, and it is on this that we are working at the moment. And so for us, it's very important just to avoid a frozen conflict or escalation. And we think that this is the way that we are taking is at the moment fragile, but a line of hope towards this political settlement. So these are some elements I will be able. So I will be glad to share with you a number of questions and on these issues. Second challenge is economy and financial stability, because the world economy has not totally recovered from the Lehman shock. And as you know, this year there will be a slowed growth, approximately 3%. And that is why we have always pushed within the G20 agenda the question of growth. And as you know, it will be number one at the agenda of the Brisbane summit, to add 2% additional growth to what was currently forecast, and this through coordination of the macroeconomic policies. Europe obviously is part of the problem, but it is not alone. There are many countries which are part of the problem in all continents. And what I would like to say just on Europe, that we are doing the job in the sense that there was a big risk with the Eurozone. You remember this crisis is behind us. We have done the work in terms of firewalls, in terms of banking union, in order just to have really sound banks with a transnational overview of the health of the banks and resolution processes, crisis resolution processes. And also all European countries are embarked on trajectories in order to redress their public finances. And now that we have a new, we have had elections in May, with now new institutions, a new commission, a new president of the European Council, a new parliament, and the first priority now in Europe is growth and jobs. And on this, we have the ECB, which is working by lowering. It has lowered its interest rates and also produced new mechanism of private assets. And also now there is a debate within the EU on the path or the path of the reduction of budget deficit in order for this reduction not to kill growth. And this is a difficult policy mix, and this is precisely now a big debate as we have in particular between Italy and France on one side and Germany on the others. But it's really the very topical debate at this stage. And thirdly, President of the Commission Juncker has decided to map a 300 billion package of financing, going hand in hand with a deepening of the internal market and innovation policies, and this will be the big subject for the meetings of the European Council next month. So we are trying to tackle and to do our part as far as growth is concerned. Lastly, it's on financial stability, because there are still matters which are not well covered, like shadow banking, and also, as you know, we are making big efforts on the tax avoidance, which now, with the weight of the multinational corporations, is really a problem. And it is in this period where, in fact, we have to give social coverage because we have slow growth. And obviously, revenues are less because growth is slow. So it's very important just to make sure that there is no erosion of the tax base because of strategy of avoidance. Lastly, protection of the planet. We have two big appointments next year that will converge. One on development, which is 10 years after the Millennium Development Goals, and so 15 years after the Millennium Development Goals. And so, what do we next? And so, it's about the sustainable development goals. And second appointment, which obviously is great interest for France, it is the convention or the conference on climate change, which should design or struck the deal on the package that will be necessary to address this major challenge between 2020 and 2030. And this is a very big responsibility. We see it as our priority number one in our diplomacy. We are not coming with pre-cooked solutions. We are now in the process of listening to everybody. In any case, there will be an important event next week with the summit held by Ban Ki-moon in New York on climate change, and also the conference that will take place in Lima, Peru, so just 1 year before the conference that will take place in Paris in December 2015. As we see things, we think that to have a success, there should be 4 components. The first one, to have a comprehensive and legally binding agreement on a number of issues, like broad objectives, like no increase beyond the 2 degrees for the warming up of the planet, about report and measure of emissions, about reviewing in view of the science what is going on and what further effort should be done, etc. This is one. Second, this should be combined with national commitments made by all countries, obviously according to their to their development and their capacities. But we think that everybody has to commit, and there is a very important deadline, which is March 2015, when, in fact, nations will have to present what will be their effort and their contribution. Third point is finance. Finance, there is a green fund that was decided in Copenhagen, you know, that we have to mobilize more than at least $100 billion by 2020. But green fund is not enough. We have to see what multilateral development banks can do, and also what private sector can do in order, in particular, just to put a price, or to put a kind of risk to carbon-related activities. And fourthly, it is to find an alliance between big cities, economic sectors, big companies on projects, what we call the positive agenda, just to show that climate change control is not a question of constraint, but it's a question of opportunities and a kind of technological leap. And this alliance will be precisely to present commitments and achievements by megacities, businesses, and economic sectors. And on this, obviously, we very much count on Asian countries, given that Asia accounts for more than 50% of the emissions due to its economic weight, population, etc. And obviously, we are talking with all Asian countries, and we praise very much what Singapore is doing, because it does have a very positive role in that context. The last element beyond all these challenges is the question of governance. Because I remember when I was dealing precisely with global affairs, the question of, and after the Lehman shock, global governance was really a major issue. And it is now an issue which is far less topical. And it has never been so necessary. Because, as I mentioned, because of this fragmentation of power, because of the difficulties of states to control things, it is absolutely necessary to have much closer cooperation and coordination. This starts with the UN. And the UN, as you know, we advocate for reform of the UN, the UN Security Council, in order for it to be enlarged and more representative. We have, by the way, another reform in the light of what happened in Syria, that the permanent members of the Security Council should suspend their veto right when it is a matter of mass murder, of mass assassination. And this is an issue that will be discussed during this General Assembly this year. Second point is G20. It has proved extremely effective in order to address the crisis of 2008. And we have always advocated for a stronger G20, which would be able to cover new dimensions, in particular, for example, climate change, or the social dimension or of globalization, or all what is related to food security. And so we are very much attached to this group. And, but it needs to have great outreach, and this is why we have always praised and supported. And I remember, because I was sous-Sherpa in G8 and G20 a few years ago, and for the French presidency in 2011, and we were in very close contact with Singapore because of the 3G, which was really a very good initiative, and came often to New York to discuss with your ambassador, was the chairman of this group in New York. So, and there are other issues like IMF and others. And last but not least, just to talk about regional integration, because we are in ASEAN with a a process which is one of the most interesting ones in terms of regional integration. And we really believe that in order to go towards a multipolar world, which would make easier tackling all the crises and challenges that I mentioned, it is absolutely necessary to foster regional integration, and that is why we are very much supporting the relationship between the EU as an entity and ASEAN. So these are a few clues and elements of French position and French diplomacy at the moment. But on all these issues, we talk with our Asian partners within the strategic partnership. So we have the comprehensive view with the political discussion. But after all this is declined, is implemented, I would say, or concretized in projects, in actions of cooperation and all over the world. So also what I wanted to tell you, because I'm here in one of the great places of knowledge, and with facing many students, that really, if you have a project, if you want to have a good overview of Europe, do not hesitate to think of France, because it's as I mentioned, it is a hub, and it is a place which shares, in fact, what is a characteristic of Singapore, which is the sense of vision and the fact that we think global. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. My name is Marion Zipfel, and I'm a French journalist here. You've mentioned in the introduction of your presentation that there was a big shift towards Asia from French diplomacy. How is this going to translate into concrete actions in terms of resources, in terms of economic diplomacy? How is that going to happen? Thank you.
Just first, concretely, it's first to improve and to enhance contacts. For example, in one country, Mongolia, there had never been a visit of a Minister of Foreign Affairs. And now there has been a visit, and now the identification on a number of projects, in particular in the mine and industry sector. One other example that it is we are considering, because we want to adjust our diplomatic network to the reality of the world. And now that we are rebalancing this diplomatic network, and so we are reducing in some places, but definitely increasing in Asia, and in particular in ASEAN. So we are really, and as I mentioned, we have also so many more visits than as I mentioned than before, and a number of projects that now are reflected in particular by the increase of the exports to Asia, because I mentioned there has been a doubling, and this is really increasing. Another element that we have appointed special representatives for specific Asian countries, and we have just right now appointed a special representative for ASEAN, who is Philippe Varin. This is for economic diplomacy, and was the chairman of Peugeot Citroën. Given to by the state of the European Union to the European Commission, so to the European Union to negotiate. And at the moment, we have several free trade agreements which are in the making. We have already one with Korea. We are almost completed one with Singapore. We have others with Asian countries, and we have a very important one also which is in the making with Japan. With China is different because it's not really a free trade agreement, because it's, but so and it's very, and so we are pushing obviously that for these agreements to be framed, obviously, if good reciprocity is in this agreement. But this is, and you know how how deep effect can have a free trade agreement, because really it's in facts in the day-to-day relationships that you can reflect those, that you can feel this this closeness. So this is the first. This is the first element. As far as military, it's Europe will not become a kind of, we will not take the role of the United States, or it's not that. But we think first we think that we may play a role. We may play a role. And first, it is legitimate for us to pay attention to security in Asia, because, as I mentioned, many investments, lots of markets, lot of population of Europeans and French live in Asia, and that any disruption or big tension in Asia, obviously, because of globalization, has a direct impact on our economy and even on our security. The big providing lines go through Asia for commodities, goods. So it's legitimate to pay attention to it. So we have a discussion with all Asian partners on their security in the region. Second, it is our partners who come to see us in order to say, we take care of our security environment, and so we would like some advice, sometimes some cooperations, even industrial cooperations or equipment. So we answer to a request. It's not that we are knocking at the door, please, I'm interested, let me in. No, it's not that. We have specific requests. And if you look at all the ties that we have, including in military equipment, it really there has been a development. Thirdly, history tells that when you have tensions in a place, if you have observers, people from outside which look, this can have an impact on all the actors. And also, we may have some experiences to share. After all, we have also our tensions. We have had our tensions, and we have some experiences to share. And so, this is the kind of things that we would be. This is the kind of things that we say in our dialogue. And I think that we are listened to. And this is why, for example, the EU and France would be are proposing or to join EAS, because this is also this matters also for France and the EU. So these are all the reasons why, in fact, we are closer ties in the domain of peace and security with Asian nations. Another element, if I may, that also are Japan, China, Singapore, India are very interested in what happens in Africa, in Ukraine, in Iraq, in Syria, because this affects them. If you look at Asian countries or Japan, they are much more dependent on oil and gas from the Gulf than we are, France, much more. And so what happens in the Gulf, which is closer to us than to Japan or Singapore, is a great concern for people of the region, for Asian countries. And on this, obviously, we have a contribution. So same applies for Africa. And the same applies for fight against terrorism. Do you think that the terrorists that at the moment are in Iraq will stay forever in Iraq? Do you think that in Asia, countries will not be affected if there is a spread of terrorism from these people? I don't think so. So what happens in Iraq that we are and on which we are working is of particular importance to everybody. Lastly, maritime piracy. Another example, Indian Ocean. This is Asia. We are fighting along with China, Japan, against America, against piracy. We have a cooperation, for example, with Japan in that regard. We even they've established a base in Djibouti. We have a base in Djibouti. We have relationship on this base. So these are the kind of cooperation. Thank you.
We have a student from Myanmar who wants to ask you a question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Liam from Myanmar. I'm a student of Prof. Bajpai. So I want to ask you about democracy. What is the France support in terms of democracy in Asia, especially in Myanmar? Because the ambassadors of US, Australia, and UK are meeting frequently to Aung San Suu Kyi. I didn't see the French ambassador is meeting her in Myanmar. Can you please tell us about your support to Myanmar? Thanks. By the way, I work for the Aung San Suu Kyi party. Thanks. Yes.
I'm glad you declared that last part.
Yes. First, we have a great admiration for Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been received in Paris and who speaks French. And democracy, rule of law, freedom is very part of our DNA. We are a nation founded on these principles. These are the principles of the French Revolution. So this is what really what we are aiming at. And obviously this is part of Europe. And as you know, when we strike an agreement with the country, we have elements about human rights, etc. This is obviously, and we support democracy all over the world. And this is particularly the case in Myanmar. Please ask Mrs. Aung San Suu Kyi whether she sees a French ambassador or not. You will see that she sees him quite often, and with a relationship of confidence. And definitely she has been received in France. She has received ministers and very high officials in Myanmar, and we follow very closely the situation in Myanmar. Thank you.
Bonsoir. I want to ask a question because... Okay, my name is Henry. I'm the adjunct professor for the American universities in China. I'm teaching the MBA program. I want to ask a question. It's about the climate change, because you spent considerable times on explaining, the climate change. I was in the UNDP and CASS conference about the climate change before the Rio de Janeiro's climate change conference. How confident how confident are you in the coming UN conference on climate change, and later the conference in Paris, that the climate change agendas would be going through?
It will be. It's a major issue. It has to be addressed, but we know that it is extremely difficult. Myself, I was in Copenhagen in 2009, and I saw how the conference failed after we managed to get an agreement, but it was extremely painful, and obviously it was an agreement of limited ambition. I cannot tell you about the probability. I know that it will be extremely difficult, but we are extremely determined, and so it is the optimism of the will. But we are very lucid about it, and so we'll do really our best. But once again, this is not just the work of the presidency. Presidency is just here to be a deal maker, to explain. But if there is no will from the different parties, it's obviously impossible to have an agreement. And this is why at the moment we are really in a very much listening mood, in order just to understand well what are the different constraints and worries and aspirations of the different parties, and from out of that to make a path according these four pillars or elements that I mentioned.
Just on that, I mean, laid out how France, in a way, will use its convening power in Paris. But perhaps what he's also getting at is, has France made a move towards its own commitments? And would you like to share some of those with?
No, yes, no, definitely. First, it's not because I am representative of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but France is a low emitter of carbon, among the lowest in Europe. And so in terms of efficiency per GDP unit, no, because this is because we have energy efficiency and nuclear, and also lots of renewables. But this isn't. But we'll take our part. And this is within the package, which is under negotiation at European level, because this is a decision at European level, and this should be agreed in October. And the idea is minus 40%. So the direction, I don't know exactly, will be minus 40% by 2030 compared with 1990 baseline, and also with objectives in terms of renewables within the energy mix. So we'll take our part, no, definitely, and we want Europe to show the example, as we say, just so to take the lead in that. But it's also within among European countries is not so obvious either.
Oh, Prof, thank you very much. My name is Eyes of Innovation. Well, Your Excellency, thank you very much. You covered very, very big ground. I will confine myself to three main points. Number one, I would like to reciprocate your goodwill offer and kind of gesture of partnering with France, and I think in the field of technology, 21C technology, energy, R&D, and multiple of that, including education and so on. Number two, with regard to the question of the inconvenient truths with regard to the miscalculation by the West, when you talk about the danger card, I think that too often you repeat the same mistake as the West keep on doing. In the sense that, they don't learn the lesson, in the sense that instead of understanding the root problem, may it be from Africa, Middle East, and so on, right through to Afghanistan, you are trying to put in your way of medicine, which is from the old boys club mentality, mindset, instead of mind shine, looking at not confrontation but conciliatory factors that you think are positive rather than negative element. I think that why can't you guys sit down and think about it? Because the media have come so much, rather than look at the kind of the media attention that you put one or incidental execution versus genocide, and you see the gap seems to be unbalanced tendency. So my question here is that, can your side, who trying to be the G20 and whatever, not my tagline, be more sensible in the sense that, look, are you going to look for solution, or are you going to create new problems? I don't know. I really don't know, because you have to relook and mirror yourself. And thirdly, with regard to the financial side, in terms of financial banking and the others, the remaking of Europe is not forthcoming. And the question is that we're not just looking about reform, but we're talking about not vintage Europe, but future Europe. In other words, beyond and above reformation. But I think that it is really a remaking in real terms and genuine. Look at the interest rate dimension. Look at the FDI. Look at everything. And you looked at it is not forthcoming. And the pretension is unthinkable. And I don't think that we are going to get anything solved or resolved with the question of mentality of the ostrich. So can you focus to focus to a question? Will you care to migrate from those sentiments?
Okay. Yeah. Let me get one more question, then you can, because we're running out of time, then you can choose what you want to really come back on.
I will address all questions.
Yeah.
Bonsoir, monsieur. My name is Yvonne. I'm an alumnus of Sciences Po Paris, and I'm currently doing my PhD at the Lee Kuan Yew School. My PhD research is actually on the emerging tax transparency regime. So I would be interested in knowing your views on how effective you think this whole attempt to get companies to declare their income, and how effective do you think the whole fight against tax avoidance will be in Europe and internationally? Thank you very much.
Okay, over to you.
I will start with the last point. I think that we have made enormous progress regarding tax havens. A lot of tax havens have closed in reality, because beyond the G20, and this is to address the question of, so first G20 is not West. G20 is China, Indonesia, Turkey, Brazil, Argentina. So it's global. It's represent in Singapore, because as you know, Singapore also is at the table. And so G20 is not everybody, but it is quite representative of the world. And it is not West. Definitely not West. And West it's much more plural or different, but I will come to that. So we have beyond the G20s, there has been a group set up by OECD, but with members outside OECD from all other continents, in order to do a kind of panel, in order just to address all country per country this question of tax avoidance at country level. Also, banking secrecy has really reduced. For example, Switzerland is no longer applying banking secrecy. This is a big... and now the question is about multinationals, which have behaviors. And so we are progressing. But there is a will from UK, from US, from Argentina, from countries all over the world just to get something. And so progressively, I think that we will manage to have something. But it's very important also just to talk to the public opinion, because corporate social responsibility means something for businesses, because they care about their reputation. So this is. So thank you. About the financial, I mean that for Europe. In fact, we have addressed the problem successfully in terms for the Eurozone crisis, because now interest rates are very low, because now there is confidence in what has been achieved in order to adjust the mechanisms which did not work within the Eurozone, in order to address a big crisis of confidence on the public debt that was not conceived when the European monetary union was designed. But now this has been fixed, and it works. After all countries have do their reforms, etc., but this is the same in all countries. Look at Brazil; they have a problem of reform. Look at India; they have a problem of reform. So it's a common problem. We have also our problems of reform. I don't think it's a question of West, of Europe, or whatever. All countries have their problem of reform. So some do more quickly than others, and when you have done them so quickly, but so you have to do them afterwards, and it's always painful. So I will come back to your what you said about representation, mistakes, etc. Because if you look at I don't want to be general, but just to take different. Because you talk about the West. In Iraq, when President Bush declared war to Iraq, it was not the West. We were not part of it. Germany was not part of it. There are countries which are not European in developing countries which were part of it. So it was not the West. We were absolutely, as you know, we asked for a cover from the United Nations. When you talk about Mali, what happened in Mali? You had a bunch of terrorists going to Bamako, that we know that they made a lot of exactions. Could we take the risk of having a big capital in the hand of terrorists? Especially when you have a president of Mali who asks for help, and he's not from the West, he's an African leader. And when you see what they've done in Tombouctou, massacring people, destroying all the old shrines of Tombouctou, which was... So was it right or not to stop them? We think that it was right. We think that it was right. Because if you look at these people, they are terrorists linked to traffickers. Because the money comes from all the traffics of drug between Latin America, Africa, Europe. So was it appropriate to do it or not? We think it was because it was a matter of urgency. When we asked in Syria, when there has been, the red line has been crossed with the chemical weapons, we asked for an intervention, remember. At the end, the intervention didn't come, and you know why. 1 year after, what do we see? The moderates, which were the future of democratic Syria, now are incredibly weak because they've been squeezed between the regime of Bashar al-Assad and the Islamic State of or Daesh, which is in fact the same coin, the two faces of the same coin. So was it appropriate not to have an intervention? I ask the question. If you look at what happens in Iraq, the number of countries which now are supporting, you have many countries of the regions. They are not from the West. You have the Arab League, which has voiced for a kind of intervention, and they are not for the West because it is a danger. Have you seen what they have done? Is it acceptable? If you have the Iraqi government asking for help, we say no. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes. We do nothing. So what will happen? What will happen? Especially when these people are through internet trying to recruit people all over the world. We have 100,000 people in France which have been taken in this kind of démarche. 300 have gone to Syria. A number have died there, and they are not all from Arab descent. Many are white Caucasian, really European. So can we accept that? Can we accept that? We think not. And if we have a terrorist attack, can we accept and say that? I agree with you that what is important is that military action is not the solution. It can be part of a solution, but it is never the solution. That is for sure. And that is why this is a French approach. We always want to see a political solution, because you need a political solution to have legitimacy and also democracy. This is what we did in Mali. This is what we are doing in Central Africa by supporting the new president, and also what we have done with a number of countries of the region to support the government of national unity of the new prime minister of Iraq. You need also to address development, and this is long-term. This is long-term, and this is what we are doing in Sahel with humanitarian and projects and development projects. Hundreds of millions altogether of Europe and of dollars put in that. This is but sometimes you need the military just to stop. But we know that the military is never the long-standing solution. Never, 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 never. But we need to intervene, and in some cases, really, it's a question of conscience. Because you cannot let barbarian acts spread all over. You cannot rely on I don't know what special force that will stop people who are become mad to do their exactions. At some time you have to say stop. Stop. But after you have to rebuild. And this takes a long time. And this is a difficulty.
I'm going to ask a question on behalf of everyone. This will be the last question. That's a bit of a provocative question on that note, which is, do you really think that we can avoid putting ground troops into Iraq, in fact? I mean, President Hollande said yesterday, France will help out and take actions, but it will not put troops on the ground. The United States has said it will not put troops on the ground. I think the British have kind of indicated they won't put troops on the ground. And yet a senior American general said half the Iraqi army cannot fight, and the other half needs, radical retraining. So are we really, I mean, kind of just running away from the problem? That very soon a decision, in fact, will have to be taken to put boots on the ground.
We'll do, this relates to the, because it is up to the people of the region of the country to address the issue. So we must help them. But it is up to them to do, because if not, you have no long-lasting solution. Because if not, you end up with occupation. And people do not like occupation, obviously. Nobody likes occupation, either Europeans, Asians, Africans, whatever. So and this is why we have taken this, also because our own population do not want to see, or are very reluctant of having their children on the ground, obviously. This means that we are precisely we are not militarist states. French public opinion loves peace and doesn't like to see their children really on the ground and at the risk of being killed. And this is absolutely so. That is why this is the option. We hope that it will work. It has to work, but it's once again it's part of the solution, because there are all the other solutions: development, economy, and political stability.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Mr. Masset. I think you'll agree that. Covered an enormous amount of ground in the great French encyclopedic tradition, and has been very candid as well in talking about France's policies and various linked matters right to the end. So thank you very much. I know you have other things to do, and do come again to Singapore.